On today's show, we got part two of my conversation with Joe DeMayo of SNY as we break down his list of the top 30 prospects in the Mets farm system.
You are Locked On Mets, your daily New York Mets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello to all you amazing Mets fans. You're listening to Locked On Mets. I'm your host, Ryan Finkelstein, and on today's show, I am once again joined by Joe DeMayo. This is part two of our conversation, breaking down his list of the top 30 prospects in the Mets farm system, which you can find linked in today's episode description. Joe does a great job over at SNY covering the Mets farm system, and on yesterday's show, if you missed it, we talked about some of the best prospects the Mets got back at the trade deadline. In particular, we talk about Sammy Stafura, Jefferson Rojas, and Elian Peña, as well as some of the top pitchers in the Mets farm system, like Jonathan Santucci, Jonah Tong, and Jack Wenninger. Today, we pick up the conversation from there and talk about some other pitchers who have big stuff in the Mets system. A couple of their recent draft picks in Carson Wiggins and Shane Sdao, and then Gabe Davis, who they got at the deadline. In the second segment, we're going to talk about some of the biggest fallers from Joe's list before the season till now, and then we close things out with biggest risers. So without further ado, here is part two of my conversation with Joe DeMayo, breaking down the top prospects in the Mets farm system. Three arms that are in the top 20. Carson Wiggins. I have no idea how to say Shane. Give me the last name because I'm not even going to be able to try.
I'll tell you this. It's actually easier than it looks like. It kind of it's almost as it reads. It's Sdao. So
Sdao.
just pretend there's like a UH after the S and then read it as it is.
Okay, so Shane Sdao and then Gabe Davis. So these are three arms that it's kind of like if you're looking at the next wave of arms that can pop, these are the three. What kind of just stands out about this grouping of guys that all made your top 20 here?
Well, I'll tell you this. Carson Wiggins is I was surprised that the pick happened, not because I didn't think there was a chance he could go that high. When I was talking to people throughout baseball leading into the draft, I was just looking into different guys, and Wiggins kind of stood out to me because I'm seeing, oh, that's a big fastball. That's a big slider. Where's he ranked? 80 what? 100 and what? So I start texting some scouts throughout baseball. It's not just Mets people, but throughout baseball. I'm like, am I missing something? Why is Carson Wiggins going to go in the third round or the fourth round of this draft? And the responses I got were like, he's not. He's going to go top 50. I got people that said he's going to go top 40. So if you want to say, did the Mets, quote unquote, reach? Maybe I would say by 10 or 15 slots. But in a way, they almost had to. They didn't have They didn't have much negotiating room to do something. And I think this year, they really wanted to take a home run swing in the first round, and they surely did, right? It's a guy that threw 14 innings in his collegiate career, missed all of this season with Tommy John, but this is someone that is a healthy player. He threw at the MLB Draft Combine. I don't think the Mets will put him into any minor league games the rest of the season. I think that's still TBD. You might see like a couple innings in St. Lucie or something, but I think he'll probably just sit out and just work out in Port St. Lucie and get ready for next year. But when he's right, it's a true, and this number is very, very rarely thrown around. I don't think I've ever thrown this number on anything, on any Mets prospect in my time doing this. He has an 80 grade fastball if he's healthy. It averages over 98 miles an hour. It's up to 102. It's got that run on it. Like, it's a truly elite offering. His slider, an absolute savage pitch in the mid to upper 80s, gets a ton of swing and misses. And he showed it at the MLB Draft Combine is he has the ability to really spin a curveball. He didn't throw it particularly much in college, but at the Combine, which was that's a pseudo bullpen session, and he wasn't really going full bore, but he was averaging over 2,700 RPMs on that curveball just in that bullpen session. So I think the natural ability to spin a baseball is there with him, and the changeup is a pitch that definitely needs a bunch of work, and the control and command definitely need a lot of work in that short span in college. He walked, I believe it was 15.4% of the hitters he faced, which is not really great, but the Mets are buying here. Can we take that command up a tick? Can we make that curveball an above average pitch? Can we make the changeup close to an average-ish pitch? And if they could do that, there's frontline starter potential with Carson Wiggins. But I think he secretly, despite the questions, has a really high floor, because I think not worst case, but close to worst case scenario, the command doesn't get to where you want it to. The curveball and changeup don't take step forwards. You just scrap him being a starter. You scrap those pitches and you say, you're a fastball slider closer. And I think he could be a closer at the major league level. So I'm very excited about Wiggins, because I think the range of possible outcomes are so wide and vast that it's almost more exciting than the guy who's like, yeah, I kind of know what he is. Like, I don't know what Carson Wiggins is. Like, we might have this conversation a year from now, Ryan. Carson Wiggins might be the top pitching prospect in the Mets system, or he might be 10 spots lower than I had him. And it's just like, oh, he's just a reliever. So it's going to be fun to follow him in 2027. And then Shane Sdao, he was the 4th round pick out of Texas A&M, had a massive 2024 as a redshirt freshman, was draft eligible in 2025. And leading into the season, there was a lot of thoughts he was going to be a top 2 round pick. And then he gets Tommy John surgery, misses the 2025 season. There was teams that, despite him missing the whole season, were trying to draft him and get him to sign for, north of $500,000 of a signing bonus. And he didn't want to. He wanted to go back to A&M. He goes back. He's healthy for the year. Stats, no good. So, I mean, if you baseball reference him, it's an ERA over 7. But MLB teams, they're not drafting guys for the collegiate stats. They want to know what's under the hood. And as the season wore on, you started to see Sdao, his stuff get back to what it was previously. And it's a fastball that's up to 97 miles an hour or so. It's a really good slider. He has a curveball. He has a changeup. And he really can throw strikes too. Like, in a way, like, I hate to do this because it feels a little lazy, but it almost like gives a feel of like Zach Thornton with just a little bit better stuff than Zach Thornton has. And he's also 6'2", 185, and the Mets think he could put on maybe like 10 to 15 pounds. And if he's able to do that, then I think the stuff could even tick up a little more. So I look at Sdao as like a back-end type of starter that still has some projectability left on him, that maybe it could be a little bit more. And he's someone, I think, in the 4th round was a very worthwhile pick for the Mets. And then the last one was Gabe Davis, they got in the deal for Huascar Brazoban. Of course, everyone will talk about it. Teammates with Noah McLean and Carson Bench at Oklahoma State. So we're the New York Cowboys, I guess, up here in Queens. Massive, 6'9", 235 fastball, sits in the mid-90s, touches 99, 100 miles an hour. A real hard power slider that gets some swings and misses. The changeup is a pitch that's taken real strides this year, and he's brought a curveball into the mix, which, if you look at the tweet that I put out where I gave my Gabe Davis kind of like thoughts, there's that little video clip. Sure looks like a curveball, and it was a pretty good one. That's in that one clip is a nice looking curve, but he was a college reliever that the White Sox converted to a professional starter, but kind of in like the 50 to 70 pitch increments. So not like full bore into a starter, but like a multi-inning guy. I suspect the Mets, at least for now, will keep him in that similar type of role. Everyone I talk to thinks this is a long-term reliever, a chance to be a high leverage one, with mainly the fastball and the slider and the couple other pitches behind it. But I think this is a potential high leverage reliever, maybe a middle reliever, but it's just adding some more big stuff to a system that I think, if you really look up and down this list, it's a system that's kind of lacking in huge stuff.
Do you think that big stuff was worth the consistency that Huascar Brazoban brought to the Mets bullpen? Because I'm still a little torn on that, but I understand that if you want to, I think what Stern said made sense, that cashing on a reliever prices this time of year is just something that they internally decided they couldn't pass on. And I guess that's kind of where they leaned with Gabe Davis here.
I see both sides of this. I consider myself quite concerned that the Mets bullpen heading into the offseason, and maybe we'll get something from Nate Lavender or Jeffrey Yan or Dylan Ross or someone down the stretch that establishes themselves as a member of the bullpen for 2027. But I'm concerned that right now that depth chart is Devin Williams. End of depth chart. So my gut going to the deadline is I wanted to keep one of Weaver or Brazoban. I knew Weaver had big value. So I went in thinking I wanted to keep Brazoban. But I also understand that, look, if you're going to trade a reliever, now's the time. You don't get the same value in the offseason. And I know there's a lot of conversations surrounding he has 3 years of control left. The guy's about to turn 37 years old. I don't know how much, like, does 3 years of control really matter all that much? I know he was a late bloomer, but we're talking about a guy in his upper 30s. So you don't know exactly when the wheels are going to start coming off. So this feels like the Mets taking a chance that they're getting out before things go the wrong way for Huascar Brazoban. But I do think there's a chance, because I wouldn't say this is a big return. I would say it was a decent to solid return for Brazoban. I do think if we look back in 2027 and, David Stearns put the onus on himself that he has to build out a bullpen. If he doesn't build out a successful 2027 bullpen and Brazoban's pitching really well in Chicago, I think this is a trade that could potentially come back to bite him.
Yeah, I'm with you. I definitely agree. I felt the same way. I was not expecting Brazoban to get moved. I knew that Weaver was most likely to get moved. And even after the Brazoban trade, I was almost like, oh, maybe do you keep Weaver? So it's going to be interesting. It's going to be really interesting to see how they fill it out. And like you said, that's one of the things I'm most interested in, honestly, in the next 2 months. Obviously, it's going to be fun to watch AJ Ewing and Benjamin McClain finish off the rookie season, as well as Zach Thornton. But to see if they can get 2 or 3 guys that you just know, okay, that's going to be part of our bullpen next year. That's going to be huge. I'm looking at the clock here, and we've been talking for over 40 minutes, so I think this turned into a 2-part episode, but I still have some big risers and followers that I want to talk about with you, so we're going to do that here in just a minute. A big thank you to our friends at Amazon for this limited break. This back-to-school season, spend less on your kids with Amazon. We all know how crazy the back-to-school shopping experience can be. It starts with a few items on the list, then suddenly you're shopping for supplies, clothes, lunch gear, and about 10 other things you didn't see coming. It adds up fast. That's why finding low prices on all the things you need makes such a big difference this time of year. When the teacher supply list arrives, and somehow everything on its own, each item, feels completely reasonable. Then you add everything together and you realize just how much stuff one kid needs for one school year. This is where you got to remember that with Amazon's low back-to-school prices, you could just spend less on your kids, because every dollar you don't spend on them is a dollar you haven't spent on them. So shop back to school at Amazon and spend less on your kids. All right, so I wanted to go through, I looked at your list going into the season and where we're at now, and I want to just talk about some guys who have seen some real movement on your top 30. And the first one we have to discuss, we're going to end with the risers, so we end on a positive note. The fallers, Ryan Clifford. I mean, it's just been a real drop-off for him. The swing and miss stuff is just getting to a point that it's very concerning. What's kind of the hope of a rebound from Clifford? Because it's not been pretty lately.
My hope truly is not that high, to be honest with you. I was debating him dropping him even further than I did, but there was a point where I was just like, all right, look, he still has a lot of power. He still really hits the ball hard. The barrel rate is there. The exit velocity numbers are there. He can pull the ball in the air with consistency. So, like, he has what you want. But the swing and miss, and I can tolerate swing and miss more than maybe some people can, but you can't tolerate 37% at the AAA level, because I don't know exactly what the equation is, but I think it's fair to expect at the major league level, you're going to strike out more than you do at the AAA level. Are we talking like a 43% strikeout rate at the major league level? If that's the case, or heck, even if he maintained a 37% strikeout rate, that's not a guy that could play at the major league level. So my concern is that Ryan Clifford is just simply not able to make enough contact to be a major league baseball player, at least not a regular one. So he's one of the biggest fallers for that reason. And it's disappointing because last year, when he got the call up to AAA, he actually trimmed his strikeout rate from AA. When he got to AAA, I believe it was down to the 25 or 26% rate. And I'm like, that's fantastic. If he could keep it here in the mid-20s with that power capabilities, that works for me. But it's ballooned way too much. And my concern is that he's just never going to be able to do it at the major league level.
It's remarkable how the Pete Alonso decision and the ripple effects from it. While there's obviously plenty of reason to criticize David Stearns, the thing, almost every move that Stearns makes, for me, I can generally see the logic behind it. And the Pete Alonso decision, I just felt like his model told him something that he needed to ignore with Pete Alonso, with the track record that he had. And I think the calculus was probably all right. I'm sure they felt like Polanco and whoever they had got to be the stopgap was going to be able to hold things down. And I think they were also thinking, well, maybe Vientos has a bounce back. That didn't happen. And I also think they really held Ryan Clifford in high regard, thinking that might have been their first baseman in the future. Everything that could have gone wrong after that decision has gone wrong for the New York Mets.
Everything. And look, I think thinking back, because I remember at the time being like, I don't really want Pete Alonso for 5 years either. Like that, I was in alignment with that. But now that time has passed, and obviously results do, whether we like it or not, like I'll never, ever deny something that I said at one time, but my opinion can evolve when I get new information. And, maybe David Stearns is far too concerned with years 4 and 5 and not years 1, 2, and 3, which I don't think there was going to be much of a problem. But the bigger issue really wasn't like letting Pete Alonso go. I know it made a lot of fans reasonably so upset. All-time home run leader, could have been on the track for the Hall of Fame, probably would have had 20 up in the rafters. That whole deal that I know mean a lot to fans. But last offseason was a heck of a first base market, or potential first base market, and he just picked the wrong guy. He could have signed Munetaka Murakami, which I wanted them to do. He could have signed Kazuma Okamoto and moved him to first base, which a lot of people thought was a good fit. He could have signed Ryan O'Hearn. He could have traded for Wilson Contreras. The list of quality first basemen that moved last offseason, and the Mets end up with Jorge Polanco. Like that the problem to me was, yes, the Alonso decision doesn't look good, but if they had gotten Munetaka Murakami or Okamoto or Wilson Contreras, even if the Mets season still didn't go well, I think Mets fans would be like, all right, well, at least they got somebody good for the spot. Now first base is a black hole currently, and there is nobody on the horizon to fill that job. And if you look at the free agent class this winter, who do you want to be your first? Do you want Jake Bauers to be your first baseman? I think that he genuinely might be the best first baseman on the market. And maybe this is a scenario, which is something that Stearns said. You've heard a lot of people like Will Salmon and such report on the addition of these prospects into the system at the deadline. Maybe it's not to trade them specifically, but I think it just opens up more opportunities. And the 2027 Mets first baseman might be someone that's currently on another roster that's not going to be a free agent this winter.
It feels like you're either going to make a big trade or it's going to be Jared Young. And look, Jared Young is not a bad player. He's proven to be very good defensively over there. Mm-hmm. And I think there's a chance he can continue to hold a 110 WRC plus, but a 110 WRC plus from your first baseman means you need to get offense at other positions. And that's just, it's a tough spot to be in. You're right. Mentioning all those other names that were in free agency. And I was, as soon as Pete signed with the Orioles, I said, all right, go trade for Wilson Contreras. That was the guy I circled. And, then Polanco the next day, I was just like, what is going on? It really, that mistake kind of compounded on itself in a million different ways, internally, externally. It just didn't work, and we'll see if they can rebound. Maybe now with adding Rojas into the system, maybe Reimers just starts to see some more time at first base, and he becomes the guy. So we'll see what happens there. Another guy that's fallen a little bit. I wonder if this is as much performance or is just the system getting better. I'm kind of curious what you see from Chris Suero. He was number 14. Now he's 23. What have you seen from this season that has him dropping a little bit in this throughout the year here?
I'd say it's a mix of results and as well other people getting added to the system. Like he was a guy that I had an arrow up on. Like I had him at 14, I believe you said at the preseason. I've forgotten my preseason rankings by now, but I thought he was going up, not down. And this year, I mean, the stats just, he strikes out way too much. Again, this is a north of 30% strikeout guy. He's hitting at the Mendoza line. He does take his walks and there is some power. So there is something that you could see in the offensive profile, but also the bigger thing for me was his defensive versatility was like his coolest trait and maybe his best trait, that he's a catcher that can play left field and can play first base. that versatility's basically been wiped out this year. He's almost been exclusively a catcher, and he's not a great catcher. Like, he's certainly a below average receiver. The throwing arm's, I'd say, above average, but it just hasn't been a great year for Chris Suero. And if they're removing that versatility that he had, that I think really what played a factor in his prospect capital, if he's going to be like a sometimes walk, sometimes pop a homer, below average defensive backup catcher, I don't know. That doesn't feel like the most valuable prospect in the world. So I don't know why. I have to figure that out, why they kind of took that versatility away. I don't know if it was too much on his plate, or maybe his athleticism wasn't playing the same way this year that it had previously. But yeah, Suero, I think it's a combination of they've added some guys that I think I like more than him, and his performance also didn't help.
Yeah, I think what I was excited about is, like you mentioned, was like that versatility of where you could carry a third catcher. And honestly, if he had progressed the right way, considering where the Mets are at and the Alvarez Torrens lineups that we've seen, that might not have been that bad of a piece to add to your bench next season. But he's certainly not trending in that direction. Another guy I wanted to mention, then we'll talk about risers in a final segment. Actually, two guys. Well, real quick, Will Watson, that's just strictly health, right? Dropping from 12 to 21. I mean, he just hasn't been there this season. So that's an easy one. I found it interesting that Eli Serrano is still on this list. So what has you holding out a little bit of hope to keep him on the top 30 when there's other names that obviously had to get taken off with all the additions?
It was so close. It was so close to dropping Eli Serrano off. It's been mainly injury with him. I know his performance wasn't awesome early on in the season here for Double-A, but I just like the tools, man. He's a long levered guy. He has above average raw power. He's a good athlete for being such a big guy. He could play right field. He has a good throwing arm. He really excelled more against right-handed pitching. So I'm like, he could be a platoon bat if they could just keep him healthy, but he's struggled to stay healthy. So that's what had him like barely hanging on. There are a couple guys that were on maybe the just miss list that, maybe you could tell me that I should have dropped Eli Serrano for that guy, but I'm hanging on for just one more run. I think he's going to get back in the game action this year, so we'll see kind of what he looks like. But I'm hanging on for just a tiny bit more. I'm not completely selling my stock on Eli Serrano, but most of it is out the door.
Yeah, I think I'm sold on it, but again, it's a good enough athlete that I get why it's still on here. We're going to talk about risers here to close things out here in just a minute. Locked On Mets is brought to you by FanDuel. Baseball fans, if you think you know who's hitting a homer today, FanDuel is giving you a free chance to call your shot with daily dingers. It's easy to play. Just make your free pick for who you think will hit a homer in their game. And if you're right, you're going to receive a profit boost to use on your next bet for a chance at extra winnings. Best of all, you can make a free pick every day throughout the MLB season. Daily Dingers is another fun way to stay engaged with every day's games, whether you're following your favorite team or keeping an eye on matchups across the league. Every game is someone capable of going deep. Now you get the chance to make your prediction before first pitch. The easiest way to play Daily Dingers used to be, hey, just pick Juan Soto. Now, if you're looking at the Mets, maybe you like Francisco Alvarez, maybe you like Carson Wiggins, or maybe you just don't think the Mets hit enough home runs, you want to go out and find another slugger. Hey, Kyle Schwarber hits a lot of home runs. You can pick him for your Daily Dinger. If you're ready to play your game today, join all the action at FanDuel.com. That's FanDuel.com to play Daily Dingers and make your free pick on who's hitting a homer. Play ball and swing for the fences on FanDuel, an official partner of Major League Baseball. Well, first of all, thank you so much for all the time, Joe, because you're giving me 2 episodes of Locked On Mets, and I do appreciate that. Let's talk about some of these names that are really exciting. Mitch Voit, it's not a huge jump. It's from 10 to 5, but I think getting into the top 5 of a farm system is a pretty big jump for Voit. It's been a really awesome progression this season, especially because it's been, from June that he had his big month, and then it kind of has carried over. So now he's in Double-A. What do you think about Mitch Voit? And also, what do you think about Mitch Voit at shortstop? Because I did not expect him to become a primary shortstop this season.
I'll tell you this. So when I was down in spring training in February, I talked to Andy Green. Now, it feels weird to say Mets manager Andy Green, because I just know him as Mets, president of player development or whatever his exact title was. But basically the guy that leads the farm. And every year when I'm down in Port St. Lucie, I get to do an interview with him for SNY. And then we talk a little bit, throughout my time there. But talking about Mitch Voit, like, they were excited about him. And when he showed up last year after the draft, Andy Green told me he was a better athlete than I thought he was, and that kind of like our number said he was, like, pre-draft. So I think he impressed them by being a much better athlete than maybe they initially thought. They had a plan already in place with Jeff Albert and Kevin Mahala, who are over the hitting development, which, the player development staff has a role in the draft, and they had a clear-cut vision that they wanted to change some things in Mitch Voit's swing to maybe allow more use of more bat speed and the ability to impact the baseball more. So they made some tweaks that kind of just like quieted his swing down a little bit. In college, it was a little more open. There was kind of some hand movement. They closed him off. He's kind of much more still at the plate, and you're seeing the results really come to fruition. After the first 2 months where he struggled a bit, I think his OPS in April and May were like 680 and 690. So like not exactly what you're looking for from a first round pick. And then when the calendar flipped to June, he's just taken off like a rocket ship. I believe his OPS is like 880 or 860 or something like that since June 1st. And he recently gets called up to Double-A, and he doesn't stop hitting. Before we got on to start recording this, I was following the game because posting him and Petrie making his Mets organizational debut. Voit was already 2 for 2 with 2 doubles. Like, all he's been doing is raking. The bat speed's there. There's exit velocity. The athleticism is at least above average, if not plus, probably closer to plus, honestly. And his shortstop defense has impressed the Mets. Most people that I talk to still think like he's better off at second base, but he can play shortstop. And the bat, while the results are fantastic, I still think from like a tool standpoint, it's more average to a tick above, maybe on both hit and power. And the reality here is, I think if you wanted to say Mitch Voit is ahead of Sammy Stafora, I wouldn't fight you. If you wanted to put him ahead of Jonah Tong, fine. But I think where I put him is, I think he's an everyday second baseman at the next level. I just don't know if it's like big time second baseman. I think it's just a regular. And if he's that for an underslot guy taken 38th overall, that's a good job by Mitch Voit and by the Mets player development to turn him into that.
Yeah, with Mitch Voit, the shortstop aspect, like I kind of thought that it was just going to be exclusive second base this year and just get him to be as elite as possible defensively there. But I think they probably think that that's an easy move for them to make. And you talk about adding all this talent to the system. Not that I'm saying Mitch Voit should be traded, but if you need prospects to get a deal done, now he's a shortstop prospect, and that's obviously more valuable. So interesting to see what they've done there. Last 2 prospects, I'm going to need some help with Wandy's last name because I know I've been butchering it. I think you got a better chance at helping me figure this one out. So Wandy goes from 15 to 7. What's the last name that I cannot pronounce?
Wandy Asigen.
Asigen. Okay.
Yeah. So we're going with Asigen. I've actually heard a couple iterations, but I'm pretty sure it's Asigen. We'll figure it out very, very soon. But man, this is impressive young man. Like a 16-year-old. Most of the time when these kids sign, they sign as 16 or 17-year-olds and they play their first professional season at 17 based on when they're born. He's done this whole year at 16, and there is swing and miss to his game, but this is electric bat speed. The exit velocity numbers that he's putting up shouldn't be doable really by a 16-year-old. You're talking a whole bunch of 108s, 109s. He's maxed at 114 as a 16-year-old kid in the Dominican Summer League, and that was on a triple. And he's an above-average athlete. He's got the actions for shortstop, but I think he's probably more of a second baseman when you really think big picture and long-term. They're swing and miss to the game, so the hit tool isn't quite where you'd love it to be. But it's, man, when you have bat speed and the ability to hit the baseball as hard as he can, it's very exciting, and he's putting up massive numbers down in the Dominican Summer League, which it's nice to see, but I don't put like a ton of stock into DSL stats. I think the story will really be told when he comes stateside next year, because you remember the numbers that Elian Peña put up down in the DSL last year, especially after his first 26 at bats or whatever that he went 0 for, and then he went on an absolute binge. And he's come over, and I think Peña's fared fine in low A, especially as an 18-year-old, but he hasn't impacted the baseball quite as good as I think he's going to in the years to come. I think when Wandy comes over, it's going to be big-time EV numbers, and if he's able to perform stateside, this is a potential skyrocket kind of prospect.
And that's what you're hoping for. If you do want to see the Mets get back on those top 100 lists, these are the guys that could pop next season and get there. And you mentioned Peña. That was the last guy I wanted to finish with. Yeah, it's kind of interesting hearing David Stearns talk about Rojas and how he's been young at every level. You kind of look at Rojas's early numbers and look at Peña this year, and I think you can say like Peña is at least holding his own right now. What have you seen from his first season stateside?
Totally holding his own. And it's kind of been a lot of what I expected, which it's going to be up and down. He's an 18-year-old. He's coming to a new country for the first time in his life. He's playing full season ball. He's not playing complex league rookie ball, right? Like he's playing full-blown low A the whole time. There's been highs where it seems there's stretches where he looks electric, and then there's stretches where he struggles. And it's kind of really what I expected. But what you're really buying here is it's an advanced approach at the plate. It's bat to ball. He doesn't strike out much. He's willing to take his walks. He works counts. He could maybe even stand to be a little bit more aggressive earlier in counts, and I think that could maybe help him impact the baseball. The exit velocity numbers are certainly below average, which he was never like that kind of guy like Wandy is, where it's big-time EV numbers. But I think there's more in the tank. There's still more physical maturation for him to do. So I think his exit velocity numbers will improve as he moves up the minors. But as an 18-year-old, being probably 2-3 years younger than the average age of the low A player, I think he's just very advanced from an approach and a bat-to-ball standpoint. And I think that's kind of his carrying card for his offensive profile. Power, I think, will come, but I don't know if it's going to be big-time power.
Yeah, and what do you think about shortstop? Do you think he's going to be able to stick there for sure? You think that might be something he might have to move off of as he gets a little bit older?
He's not a great athlete. He's like an average-ish athlete, so like he feels third baseman-ish to me. But the Mets certainly, as you kind of mentioned with Voit and with other guys, he's going to play shortstop as long as he could play shortstop. But I think he fits more like a third baseman due to kind of his athletic profile. And he does have a plus arm. So I think the throws from third base aren't going to be a problem for him.
Awesome. Well, one very last question. You mentioned you had to take a lot of players off of this list when all the additions came in. What was the toughest prospect, or who was the toughest prospect that you had to leave on the cutting room floor? Like, who's 31?
Trey Snyder.
I thought that was going to be the answer. I did.
Yeah. Trey Snyder, 31. Like him and Eli Serrano, I fought over. I wanted to put the pitcher that they got from Rayleigh at 30. I like to use, and this is a little behind the scenes for you, I like to use number 30 as who's someone that isn't on anyone else's list that I think is kind of interesting, that a year from now, if he does well, I'll look smart. You know who at one time I put number 30 a couple years ago when no one else had him ranked?
AJ Ewing?
AJ Ewing was number 30. I was just like, there's a little something here. And I don't think we're going to see that type of rise from the Phillies pitcher who's number 30. And I'm so tired. I'm blanking on his name somehow.
Luke Gabrish?
Gabrish. There you go. Yeah. Luke Gabrish. That's the guy. Some interesting stuff. But your question was about Trey Snyder, and he's had a big year. Former $1 million signing to get him away from Tennessee. The thing with him, I think that kept him at 31 instead of 29 was it's not a tool. There's really not big tools here. It's average-ish contact. It's below average power. It's kind of average speed, average like it's a lot of average. He's more of a ball player kind of guy than one of your tooled up prospects that maybe you're used to talking about. So yeah, Trey Snyder was the guy. He's having a great year in St. Lucie. He actually hit his first high A home run tonight, Tuesday, for Brooklyn. So maybe Trey Snyder's the guy that will look back in a few months and be like, yeah, maybe he should have been 29 instead of Eli Serrano. So yeah, I like that we were on the same page. But yeah, Trey Snyder is my number 31.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for all this time. I did not tell you I'd have you for an hour, so I really do appreciate it. I will have linked and I'll have mentioned on the opens for these two shows that I now have to check out the top 30. I'm going to link it in the episode description. It is as comprehensive a top 30 as you're going to find out there. That's not behind a paywall, which is always great to be able to get all the information you need on the top of this Mets system. And obviously, you can check out Joe over on the Mets Pod on SNY. Again, Joe, thank you so much for all your time.
My pleasure, man. It was a blast. I love talking prospects, and sometimes the time gets away from me. I'm a podcaster, so at core, I just have thoughts and I want to get them out. So thank you for having me. I appreciate it. Everyone, go check out the Mets Pod. Go check out my top 30 list. It was I checked. It was 5,233 words, including the little blurb that I throw on the top that I don't think anyone cares about or reads or has much interest in. But I believe this is it's a lot of work, and I believe that I think it's the best top 30 that you're going to find for the Mets. So go ahead, check it out. And Ryan, thanks again. I appreciate you.
That's going to be all for today's edition of Locked On Mets. I appreciate you all for tuning in. We'll be covering the Mets series against the Pirates throughout this weekend, so make sure you stay locked into all of your Locked On Mets content. Subscribe wherever you get your podcast, follow, rate, and review, all that good stuff, and also subscribe if you're watching on YouTube. Thank you for making Locked On Mets your first listen or your first watch every day, and thank you for making Locked On the #1 sports podcast network.